Hi guys, I'm here with Dan Stevens. He's a good friend of mine on Twitter, and he is well, I would call him a researcher, professional athlete, business owner, like smart dude. He's a smart dude. Okay, so like that's where we're gonna go.
Supposedly, I wouldn't go that far. I've just looked at a few things and been involved in some stuff that has opened my eyes to corruption and uh, agendas and politics and things across different platforms. So smart's
Yeah.
maybe an overstatement.
So today we're gonna kind of focus on hidden history, and we're
Mm,
also going to focus on, yeah, like basically like what is controlling us, like what is going on here, because
yeah,
unless you've had your head in the sand, something's going on, which, and you can disagree with it,
yeah, and I
but
think I think that's
yeah.
yeah. So I think that's the big question, is it? What is really going on? We, we've we've all done a lot of research, all looked at a lot of stuff. And I think the underlying theme is that whoever controls the past controls the future, certainly the present. And I think that what you're seeing at the moment, for sure, especially with the research that we've done on sort of the megalithic sites and the ancient sites, is that nothing is as it seems. Clearly, clearly, when you look at what's gone on in Egypt, you look at spots, locations like the Serapeum, Saqqara, um, Stonehenge, the pyramids, Peru, Aswan Quarry. Nothing's what it seems. Things are going on there where huge blocks have been moved, huge blocks have been, you know, they look like they've been softened and then shaped, and then nubs have been either pulled out of them or cut into them or however they're made. Um, and I think one of the key things for me in terms of understanding what was really going on is just understanding the Mohs scale, and the fact you never get taught about that at school. You never get taught that in the Bronze Age, the tools were soft. Bronze is quite soft. I think the softness rating is 3. And then you're told that these ancients were cutting and quarrying and moving these blocks, and the focus is on moving. How did they get the block from A to B? But the focus isn't on how did they cut the block, how hard
Which
was the tool
honestly,
cutting
like
the block.
copper wouldn't cut
Yeah,
them. So
no, no, no. And even my children know that now. Like, once you've only got to sit down with a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old and say that this is the Mohs scale. Diamonds are here, granites here,
mhm.
copper tools are there. How do you think they cut these granite blocks? And the first thing they say is, well, you can't do that with those tools because they're softer than the blocks. And
Yeah. And
that's the
also,
obvious thing. That and
I mean,
that's
there's not really that many we don't really have the tools anywhere, what they did use.
no, definitely. And most people have got a cutlery set in their drawer in their kitchen, and that comes from IKEA, and they're made of steel. Those tools are harder than Bronze Age tools, and the reason you've got a granite worktop in your kitchen is so the tools don't cut through the granite worktop. That's how that works.
Right.
So to then say the ancients were using tools softer than those, but they were cutting through granite, and not only cutting through granite, cutting through 100-ton blocks of solid granite, and then moving them as well. But of course, it's all about optics and it's all about distraction. The education system is taught to make the children ask the question as to how do you move these? How did they build this? So the real issue is how did they cut it? And it's in its most basic essence. It's like how did you forget where you got it from? Forget how you moved it uh, onto site. The short point is how did you cut it? And then when you look at the tools and the period of time they're in, it just doesn't make sense, doesn't stack up. So they either had advanced tools or harder tools, um, or they were potentially made a lot more recently. Um, and so that's the question: is how old is this stuff? And you look at anomalies in sites. You look at Peru, you look at Coricancha in Peru, and then you look at the Valley Temple in Egypt, and they're effectively, you can see they're made by the same people because it's the
Mhm.
same process, the same cuts, the same shapes. So the scenario is the Valley Temple 2000 BC, um, and is Peru 600, 700 AD, wherever it's meant to be. So there's clearly a difference. So when I first started looking at the subject, I was asking the question, well, if the Valley Temple looks like Peru and the Valley Temple's in Egypt at 2000 BC, then you'd assume that Peru must be made by the same people because the hallmarks are the same. So whoever made that made both sites. And the assumption for me originally was, well, is the Valley Temple at 2,500 BC the same age as the site in Peru, and that makes the site in Peru a lot older. But now my thinking is starting to shift. I think it's the other way around. I think that Peru is maybe newer is the newer of the two sites, and the Valley Temple is quite recent. It's not 2,500 BC, but at least the Peru style blocks aren't 2000 BC.
Yeah, I don't. It's very weird because, like, for me, the dating that we do have on any kind of stone dating is like very flawed. I mean, your carbon, your uranium dating, whatever it is, it's just like wah wah. Like, I don't trust any of it at this point. And so I'm completely at a point where I don't know what to believe about what we're fed or not about any, like, so dating to me is almost becoming arbitrary. But with like our group that we have a little nub group on Twitter that we uh, uh, basically look at daily pictures of nubs and things, and there it shows that there was a global civilization everywhere. Like, there's nubs in India, China, South America, like every continent has. Are there nubs in Australia? Probably.
The underlying issue there is you're absolutely right. The group has put together lots of pictures. Phil contacted me on Twitter, asked me to be part of the group. And that was a real eye opener for me, because seeing all of these pictures in a context of having a collection of all these images is great, because you can look at the images in this site and this site and this site, and you can see that they're made by the same people. It's like
the same thing.
And the analogy I use is like it's like a swoosh on a pair of Nike trainers. If you see that swoosh in Mexico, if you see it in Australia, if you see it in Spain, France, Italy, Germany, that it's the same brand. And the nubs, in a way, it's effectively a brand, a global brand, because that nub is similar to the swoosh on a pair of Nike trainers, and that's seen all over the world. The problem you have is that the nubs are then seen on sites that are all different dates.
Yeah, all different. That's the thing. They're like Greco-Roman and
So let's assume, if you go back to the Valley Temple, that's 2000 AD, BC. Sorry, 2000 BC, and Peru is let's call it 600, 700 AD for the sake of this conversation. And then you go, okay, right, we're going to now calibrate a carbon dating device. So where's your starting point? Before you set the calibration for that device, and before you start calibrating how things age, you need to know that the start date is right. And let's assume you use the Valley Temple and you calibrate carbon dating against that, and that's said to be 2000 BC. Well, it actually turns out it's maybe 500, 600, 700 AD. Then your calibration device is exponentially wrong over the whole range. So if you're saying, well, 1,000 or 2,000 years looks like this, but that's wrong, that's actually forward from that point, then all of your carbon dating processes are wrong, and everything else that goes with that is wrong. And of course, when you look at the Valley Temple, you can see that there was another site there. If you look at images of the walls, you can see that the walls cover another wall. And when you look behind those blocks in the Valley Temple, the actual blocks behind that look ancient. They look way more than 2,000 or 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years old. They're just covered in erosion, and they look like the new blocks have been put on top of that to protect them or hide them or cover them up or suppress a previous historical group that was there, or whatever they're doing. It's literally a cover up. These blocks have been cut, shaped, pushed on top of an older site, and you can no longer see what was there before.
I feel like we've had resets, as it were, more than once, right? Like, there's been multiple resets. Why do I believe that? Because of all the different types of hominins that you find, like Denisovan, Neanderthal, like whatever, like the little hobbit people that they have found, or um and I start thinking, what if like every time it's reset, it's like repopulated with a new
With a new
species?
species of human or a new
And like
project.
so like yeah, so maybe the people who built the megaliths were a different species of human or a different kind of hominin than we are. I don't know. Okay, how easy would it be to destroy everything in our current civilization? Probably pretty easy. Like
Easy. And it's
literally.
getting easier by the day. It's getting easier by the day. So as we become more focused on the internet, more focused on removable hard drives, more focused on smartphones,
Hmm.
everything is digital.
Yep, less tangible physical
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you hear the stories from the past when they say they lost the Library of Alexandria, stuff like that. Well, if we was to literally reset our civilization, all of it's digital. You could literally click your fingers and most of the data would be gone. All of the academic research would be gone. Certainly all the images that we've got on a hard drive, um, wherever that's stored on the cloud that we'll look at and we're basing this conversation on, click of a finger, all of that would be gone. The source for those images would be gone because those images are pulled off of, people's holiday photos, site visits, trips to, wherever the site is, Peru, Egypt, Cambodia, wherever they are. They're all digital images.
Yeah,
So
and
when
let's
you,
say you found it, like like whatever, like let's say you found an iPhone or a that was perfectly preserved, or you found a hard drive that was perfectly preserved, like 10,000 years from now, you wouldn't even have the devices to figure out how to read it or how to do
well,
anything
no,
with it.
you're looking at, what a 300 milliamp lithium ion battery, that's got
Yeah,
a usable life of 28 to
well,
48 hours.
but let's say you found like a little flash drive or something,
Yeah.
like that like there's no way of
How would you even fire it up?
yeah, you
Remove
wouldn't be able to
electricity,
fire it up.
remove batteries, and within a couple of weeks you'd be screwed. Um, and so in terms of resets, as you become more evolved and you become more focused on that kind of data and that kind of storage, that you could have access to the biggest library in the world today, and then tomorrow the biggest library in the world could be lost.
Yeah.
So as you evolve and things become digitalized, it becomes easier. So you see these cycles of resets where you could literally have um, you know people who are said to be living in our past history, that are writing things in stone tablets, on scrolls, etc.,
Like
etc.
uniform clay
Then they
tablets.
become more vulnerable. The data becomes more vulnerable as you become more sophisticated. So it's almost like it's easier and in a way kind of designed to be reset. You start from stone tablets, you then go on to like paper scrolls or whatever they are, and as you become more evolved, you get into Photoshop and Illustrator and everything becomes digital, and then everything becomes easier to move. And even those digital images and the graphics and the artwork and everything that you're producing, that's shared on a digital basis as well. So it's not like you need to walk into an art gallery and tear down all the oil paintings and destroy all those, because the painting is done digitally on tablets with iPads or whatever. So as we're becoming more evolved and more sophisticated, we're becoming more vulnerable, and easier to erase.
Yeah.
So it would be harder to erase people in the past than it would now. And this is one of the issues I've been looking at, because what I'm seeing is a pattern forming. So when you look at current events, they are quite telling, because current events tell you what these people are capable of in terms of spreading disinformation, and anyone trying to spread the truth themselves is classed as spreading disinformation. This is the problem you've got. So recent events show us what these people are capable of. They also show us that these people are a collective group that
Yeah. There's a
must
lot.
be
There is a
bigger than we
definite
think.
lockstep, like every country is falling in line with some.
Yeah,
There's something beyond. There's a hidden hand that is controlling it, and it's very
yeah,
obvious to see.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Yeah, like
so
a few months pre 2020, all of the governments and all the individual nations all over the world couldn't agree what day it is, and then like just with a click of a finger, they're all in lockstep together with the same virus, the same medicines,
same
shutting down the same
mask, same yeah
treatments, everything
everything.
else, same masks. So what it shows is that the disagreements are contradicted by the globalized agreement and the globalized strategy. So, in terms of how does that affect history, what that shows us is that they can rig the game globally, and they can switch it on, switch it off. 1 minute they're their foe, next minute their friend, as a collective, and they're pushing against us. So when you look at the way Joe Rogan's been treated on some of his interviews, and you Google these doctors that Joe's spoken to, and you realize how talented they are, how credible they are, what their credentials are, and then you Google the doctor's name, the very first thing you see is debunked, discredited. And that's all people need to see now. The lay person just needs to see the word debunked and discredited. And I think they deliberately put a D in front of it to make it even easier, because you've got that word there that, discredited, debunked, doesn't really matter. It's just
don't need to look further.
Don't even look further. Yeah, exactly. So how far does that debunking and discrediting reach into academia? So when you really dive deep into academics and you look at what we're looking at, the glaringly obvious question is, how can these world-class historians, academics, archaeologists not see what we've seen? And what we've seen is polyagonal walls all over the world, nubs on all the sites all over the world, and a process of making these that are joined up all over the world, and it's all done by the same people with the same technology. So given that is so glaringly obvious, the question that needs to be asked is, how do the academics not see what we see? And the answer to that is that they can't not see what we see. They must see what we see. Therefore, to not deal with that is disingenuous, and it's planned and it's meditated and it's organized. And that's what we need to realize, that these people cannot have not seen this. So they have seen it. And in spite of seeing it, they're spinning us a yarn that it's.
See, but I don't know.
Else.
Sometimes that's where I kind of don't know, like, how many people are involved in this. Like, because I don't know.
Don't need many people. That's the point. If you look at the H bomb in World War II, when they were building the H bomb, there was 140,000 people working on that, and only a handful of people knew what they were doing. And this is what you see when you
over compartmentalize.
Yeah, and compartmentalizing is exactly what they've done, and that starts in 2000. So you look at a period of time where the economy goes tits up. As the economy is going tits up in Britain, certainly they were encouraging people to go to university, get degrees. Higher education was the buzzword. And again, they were all in lockstep together: higher education, degree level students, blah blah blah. And what they were doing is creating a form of what I would call artificially intelligent people. So it's like an organic artificial intelligence. And one of the objectives, certainly in Britain, was to give these students student loans and student grants, because obviously that injects money into the economy. So they would all go to Virgin Records or HMV, or, at the time there was no iTunes, no Netflix. So they would all buy DVDs and videos, and obviously that increases the high street spend. So when that high street spend is increasing, everything that's good, students think, well, I'm great, it's at university, the economy is booming, things are picking up. And obviously that's taxpayers' money that they're being lent, so they can spend it in the high street to create a false peak in the economy. And it obviously then encourages them that they can get jobs at the end of it. But basically, these people are degree level students, but what research are they really doing? They've been given a textbook, they've been asked to read the textbook, they're then writing dissertations while they've got the textbook in their hand, and then maybe, if you're lucky, they're getting an exam at the end of it asking what they've learned. But it's programming. It's, here's a book, this is your syllabus, this is what you've got to learn. Do you remember it? At the end of the 2 or 3 year, 4 year period, they ask you if you remember it. If you can remember information, then they'll let you out into the world.
Oh, I mean,
and as someone that's credible.
You get if you've actually gone through the the bullshit academic art thing, it's very much like recite my opinions to me, like that's essentially what it is, and it's a giant indoctrination.
And you repeat it.
Yeah. And it teaches you, they like talk about critical thinking as they're teaching you how to be compliant. Like like they'll use
Yeah,
buzzwords like
exactly.
critical
Yeah.
thinking, but that's not what they're doing. They're teaching you how to be compliant and how to see the world as I see it, because that's the only way there is. You know, it's really
And
it's
everything's an inversion as well. There's You see these inversions all the way through everything. They're literally, like you say, you're being taught to think critically while you're being trained to not think critically.
mm,
So here's what you need to learn it, but think critically, but don't think too hard, because you need to repeat what we're saying. So repeat after me: A, B, C. So Roman, Greek, so on, so on, so on.
right.
So then you'll post a picture on Twitter, and a person who's a quote unquote academic will parrot what they've been taught, but they're not what you'd call a researcher. They're just like a sock puppet, trained sock puppet.
And if you
So they're
differ,
artificially intelligent. Do you see what I'm
it's
saying? They're
yeah, that's
not
actually true.
they are intelligent. They are intelligent people. So that's harsh saying they're not intelligent. These are intelligent people, but they've been put through a system that's sourcing and proactively headhunting people that can record a set narrative and then repeat it, and then they get rewarded for that.
Well,
And along the way, they've been
I've noticed that
institutionalized as
people
well.
who in my life, the people who are really high up in academia, and I have family members who are doctors and professors, and I love them and everything, but I will say that they were very into artificial rewards. Like they love their A's. I can't get a B. I can't get a B. I can't get an A
I need an
minus.
A.
I
I need
have
an
to
A.
get an like I have to get the top mark. I have to, they definitely feed on that. You want a sticker? You want this
Yeah,
sticker? You
yeah,
like
yeah,
this sticker?
yeah. Oh,
If you
like
do bad, you get this frowny face sticker. If
you
you
know,
do good, you do, yeah.
one thing I will say, which is, I know, like, obviously Rob's in the group. I know Rob has got a degree, and Rob is a thinker. Not Rob, sorry, Andrew. Andrew is a thinker, and it's important that we don't try and tarnish everyone with this label of saying, well, all degree students just don't think.
No, I
The
mean, like
issue
I
is
have a
that,
master's degree. I mean,
yeah,
and that's like why I'm shitting on it more.
yeah,
It's not I guess I think it's like my opinion is that people are giving their power away to the concept of authority like way too
mm,
much, and
mm,
that's what I would like to break down. Being like that's cool if a person has spent a lot more time on the subject and studied it, take their thing into account for sure, but that doesn't mean that nobody else can look at it, and it doesn't mean that everything they say trumps whatever you have come to your own
yeah.
conclusion, anything you've looked at it.
And the other thing as well, if you look at the pattern, so these people that go into university, they go through university, get the loans, go into the high street, artificially increase the high street spend, um, with brands like the HMVs. And then as that's going on, running parallel to that, you've got the rise of the hedge funds and the private equity company, or companies, should I say, that are then getting funding from China, Bank of China, you know, private equity firms like Steel Street, BlackRock, Vanguard, and then gradually buying up land, buying up all the properties, building new properties, buying up the businesses, buying up their competitors, and then recruiting the students who have been trained to record this information and parrot this information, and then not question it, and then placing them, in these businesses that they run. And they're working with the universities to actively source these guys. So you then end up in a debate with someone, and they will, come out with crap like, well, I'm clever, I'm a hedge fund manager, or I'm a senior partner at a bank. And so you're just part of this system, and it's this system that's being built. And what you're seeing now is this sort of climax of this system coming together, where everyone's in lockstep. And you look at the woke agenda and all the stuff that's going along with that, and then you find that's being compartmentalized, because the big private equity firms that own these businesses ultimately will weave that culture into the fabric of those new businesses. You could, being cynical, you could argue that one of the reasons to buy these businesses is to roll out the wokeness all the way through the business, and people have got nowhere to go because it becomes part of the corporate identity of these brands. But that's actually the corporate identity of the owner of those brands. And I've seen this in my own business, where there was a period of time where there was this whole agenda of GDPR, and everyone's got to comply with GDPR and all the other rubbish that goes with that, and all the businesses running around, and the funders from the top saying, well, it's got to be compliant, and there was all this bullshit bingo and buzzword bingo with compliance and the GDPR stuff and all the data protection stuff. And you look back at that now, running simultaneously with that was a whole media operation where they were saying they were combating fake news, fighting disinformation. So you're now looking at a period of 2014, 15, 16. So if you was going to roll out a large scale propaganda campaign in 2020, knowing that you wanted the buy-in from everyone, would you in 2014, 15 and 16 create a scenario where you want to make it look like you're combating disinformation, fighting propaganda, fighting misinformation, knowing that that's going to get the buy-in? Because 3 years down the line, you yourself are going to roll out a large scale propaganda campaign. And of course, the members of the public are going to look at that and say, well, why would that person say that? Because 3 years ago, they were the head of a department in the British government that was combating disinformation. But of course, that was part of that itself was propaganda. And you see that in paedophilia, where children get groomed. So this is a form of grooming and brainwashing that they were doing in terms of setting the scene and making you buy into whatever they say, lock, stock and barrel. And this is what people have done. So the question then is, like you say, who is behind this? And how does that relate to who is behind the suppressed and hidden history? And then how far back does that agenda go? How far back do these people go? And is it as ancient as we think?
Because here's my thing too, is that I feel like some of us are kind of, I mean, I've gotten help from people and research things, but a lot of these things I just started realizing them on my own. And I came to the breakaway civilization on my own without reading a book with anything, just going to these sites myself. I was like, okay, something else created this than us, and something's they didn't just go away. What happened, and what are we not being told, and what are we being lied to, or whatever. And that's how that I got came. And I can't be the only one. And I know not. There's so many. I have friends and so many other people are putting the dots together. So my thing is we have now created the Tower of Babel. That's what the internet is. The Tower of Babel, they don't let you keep very long. So I don't know when this is going to get taken away from us or what's going to happen, but try to figure out what information you really need, because I don't think this is around for that much longer, to be honest. I mean,
no, you're
a lot
right.
of people argue that with me, but I mean,
yeah, my Twitter account has got 15,000 followers, and I'm putting posts out and they're getting 3 likes. So the account itself is shadow banned. So for some reason, they don't want to ban me, kick me off Twitter. It's important for me to stay there. Don't know why. But then when I do get a tweet that sort of breaks through the shadow banning, then you'll see it get astroturfed. So what you see is there'll be a series of followers that will comment almost be on side with what you're saying. And I think you want people to be objective. You don't want everyone to be a yes man and say, yeah, I agree, you're right. You want criticism. But what you're seeing is not criticism. You're seeing someone comment on a post and they've got 4 followers. And then immediately another account will comment on their post supporting what they say, and that will have 3 followers. And then you'll see another account comment on that post and that'll have 4 or 5 followers, and so on and so on. And what that's called astroturfing. So what you've got is one user, one sad bastard in a fucking spare bedroom somewhere, and they've got a bank of 6 or 7 phones with 6 or 7 accounts on them, and they're just all replying to their own posts. So I don't personally believe that people are that sad or they're that fanatical of supporting the agenda.
Yeah, I agree.
So who are they? There must be some kind of operatives for the people rolling out the agenda. They're probably getting paid, or it's AI.
I was gonna say, or they're the bots. Yeah. I mean, I definitely have I'm starting to read. I at one point had grand delusions of oh, I'll just become a YouTuber and have lots of followers, and uh like, this is what I'll do, I'll just be the Oprah of weird. uh and then now I'm pretty much like, here I am, year 3, get a
Yeah.
good 700 followers, like nobody watches anything, maybe get 100 views per video I do or whatever. So it's not about followers for me anymore. This is about, like, I got to figure out, and this is what's been nice, is that, like, a couple of people that it does break through to, and they do kind of see some stuff, and I'm finding my tribe. It's a way for me to find
Yeah,
my
yeah, you're right.
tribe.
You're right. You're right. And
And it's like, I think that that's really important to do before the lines are shut.
yeah, I think so. And we're seeing that certainly seeing that on Twitter. At the same time, you're seeing other platforms open up. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, something's going on. And I think, like, at the start of this conversation, I was talking about who controls the past, controls the present. So I think they've already lost control of the past. The question is this: do we really need to know? Other than knowing what's gone on, isn't what's happened. So our history isn't what we are
I
told,
think it is.
right?
Yeah.
So that's almost, you could almost say that's fact, without sounding arrogant. Or um, so the question is, do you really need to know what has actually happened? So there's two questions. One, what's important? Is it important that we just know that we've been lied to? Or is it important that we know that we've been lied to and we want to know the truth? Because if we know we've been lied to on this level, you're never going to get to the truth.
Well, I mean, I think it's the same kind of thing with, like, like, everybody thinks that the government's going to give you disclosure, like, of, like, aliens and stuff, or UFOs. And, like, I've been researching UFOs for, I don't know, 15 years now or something.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't want to get, like, they're not the people who are hiding it from you are not going to give you the information. Like, and if whatever it comes to, it'll be a half truth at best. So how would you even, if we did find out the truth about the history, how would we even trust that? So I mean, it really comes down to, I think, yeah, it's important to know history so that you don't repeat the past. And it's also kind of like, I think it's a warning sign for, like, okay, are we looking at, like, we live on a completely unstable earth surface, and she flips poles, or she gets solar mass coronal ejections that hit her every 200 years, or she blows her top with volcanoes and creates new continents every, so I mean, what's the deal? I don't know, like, how unstable is the earth herself? Like, and it, like, is it have anything to do with
I think it's
natural
really
stuff?
stable. I think it's really stable.
You
I
do
think
think, so then you think it's intentional. So then, like, the things that
it's
are,
intentional.
okay, so and then that's, so if that's the case, then that's a whole, then that's a different angle too to go.
So there's a number of themes you see
But
running,
we need to know
right?
for sure, is it natural or is it cause? Like, for me, I think that there's past nuclear wars. Like, that's what we're dealing with. Like, if you want to talk about, like, mud floods, or, like, the concept of things being buried and all this stuff, I think we're looking at maybe, like, nuclear weapons that we currently have today, but en masse are on par with some kind of wars that I think happen. Like, I think they, like, physically reset stuff. Even look at the forest. Like, I think that's a big, like, the forests aren't, how old's the most forests are, like, under 200 years old. I mean, you have some redwoods and you have some other examples, like, you even brought this up, and I was like, yeah, that's a pretty good point. But I mean, we're living on a very, yeah, it's a very contrived, weird planet.
Yeah, and the first thing on all of this stuff is there's always an answer for something.
Right.
So if you look at the forests, if you look at like, I do a lot of cycling in my local forest. I've ridden a mountain bike in my forest since I was 14, 15, I think, like mid 40s now. So one thing you notice is the trees don't really get that much bigger. It's not like they grow a ring every year, because they'd be double the size by now, some of these trees, and they're not. So you then start counting rings of trees that are cut down in the same forest, and you only really get to 300 years. Now, the forest I'm talking about supposedly is a Saxon forest, and there's a Roman road that runs through the forest. So we're on a path from Cambridge to London, and this is one of the Roman roads that went from Cambridge to London all the way through. So this is an old road, but the trees look no more than 200 years old, in that same forest. And you can check that. You can see trees they've cut down. You can measure them compared to the other trees. They're no bigger than they're no smaller than the largest. In fact, some of them are the largest, and they're only a couple of hundred years old. So then you look at all the agriculture, and you look at the the space from London to Cambridge, and it's just fields, just empty fields. There's fields and fields and fields and fields and fields. Now they'll say that is modern agriculture. And then you look at the trees and say, well, okay, how comes there's no ancient trees? So the mainstream would say, well, okay, with no ancient trees because we cut them all down, and humans in the area were responsible for deforestation, as in part with the agriculture, in part with modern farming, building houses, building coaches. You're like, right, where are the people? And so the academics will say, well, the road has buildings dated kind of 1400 AD, right? So there's old buildings there. And then you start walking around all the churches. So where all these lanes are, every probably 5 square kilometers, there's a flint built church. Next to the church, there's a red brick building with a sunken basement, a mud flood basement. And there's a collection of 3 or 4 of these houses. And then there's nothing. And then 5 square kilometers down the road, there's exactly the same again. And then every now and again on this Roman road, you'll see like inns or taverns or pubs that have got 1400. It seems to be important to write the date on everything. So you go into the graveyards and you start looking for the people, or you start looking for medieval graveyards, and there are none. So you then walk around the graveyards and you can't find any graves for people pre-1800. And when you do see graves for people that are pre-1800, they're typically a good 40 or 50 years beforehand. So you see 1800, and then you see 1760. But you don't see 1770, 1780, 1790. So it's like these people were put there and died at the age of, they died, well, in that year, 1765, and then their offspring died at 1800, which makes sense, because if you had a 50, 60-year-old son or daughter, you die in 1764, they're going to die in 1810, 1800, something like that. And at every site, you see, I wouldn't say every site, I'd say it's every third site, you see 2 or 3 gravestones that are dated at like 1764. No earlier. I'm not seeing any that are earlier. And the headstone will have a J instead of a 1, and then it will change to an I, and then it will change at 1800. It's clearly a 1. One of the churches has got a medieval set of stocks outside it that are 1550, 1600, something like that. So clearly there was some people there. So one of the arguments is that when you go into the churches, the graveyards look like they're higher. So what they've done is they've just buried people on top of the previous graves. But when you walk around the graveyard, you can see that there isn't actually that many tombstones. And there are a number of churches near me that are one of them is a derelict, sort of a haunted house type thing. And it's completely flat. And it hasn't been raised. So it's clearly the only grave, and it wasn't built on anything else. So there's always an explanation, is an excuse to justify what your lying eyes are telling you, and there's always a bullshit excuse. Like one of the excuses I've seen with the Victorian buildings with the sunken basements was that they dug them out, and if you go around to the gardens are lower than the front. But then you look at the sites I'm looking at locally, and you can see a basement at the front of the building, and then in the back of the building, the garden's higher than the back. So that story doesn't wash. So there's always these stories and these theories for it.
Or you hear the argument of like, oh well, every what is it they say? They say something in archaeology about how every 10 years you get raised an inch in height.
Yeah. So the ground is raising. As you get older, the ground is raising.
Yeah, because of debris and things that we do, repaving.
One of the houses I lived in was 300 years old, red brick building, and it was dated it was built in 1700. And no one, I'm not saying this is the case of 300 years, but typically, if it was true that the ground was raising and dust and debris collects and it gets bigger and bigger, then all these old buildings would be you know, 6 foot deep on the roof. You know, you never go on holiday and come back and your garden's a centimetre. You know, and I had a property in France, so I wouldn't visit my property for a year. And I'd go back to the property and perfectly clean. So there's this kind of misconception that the dust is blowing in and it's burying your driveway, and every year it'll be like 5 millimeters, and a year after it'll be 5 millimeters. If you dig down 2 meters, you can age it. Doesn't quite work like that, because that would mean that if you moved into a house in 1970, by the year 2000, your garden's going to be 50 centimeters deeper than it was when you bought it.
That kind of makes me think about things like Göbekli Tepe or like Karen Tepe that were like intentionally buried, and you're wondering if it's like, was that just like some people like us going like, oh, they're about to reset us, let's
Well, this is what I'm saying about excuses.
preserve some stuff for people in the future so they can figure it out.
So you look at Göbekli Tepe, and oh, well, they buried that themselves. Yeah, okay, fine. What about the Forum in Rome? Oh, that was the river flooded and the sediment coming. So you look on Google Maps and you find out the site is higher than the river. So like, the river must have run uphill. And then you go to Stonehenge and say, well, how comes it wasn't buried? They go, oh, well, they put that back together. You're like, yeah, but before they put that back together, it wasn't buried either. So it's like so it's not consistent across every site, and every site's got a different story. And it's not until you see all of these sites and match up all these stories that you call bullshit on the whole lot. Yeah. Because there's not a commonality that's been applied to everything. And when you then look at that scenario and you look at other buildings near it, or you look at, you know, modern properties, especially in London, you know, in London, you've got a lot of air pollution, a lot of dust and crap flying around, high winds in Britain. You know, we've had a lot of high winds for the last 10 or 20 years. So by all accounts, the buildings, the rooftops of those high buildings in London should be getting covered in dust. But they're not. You don't see anything on those buildings. So this theory that as things get older, they get covered by is it the stratosphere, whatever they're calling it. So it's just bullshit. And you see it's bullshit when you start looking at the individual situations and you start putting them all together and go, well, how comes if that works, why doesn't it work now? And there's a story for that. Okay, well, if it doesn't work there and it doesn't work where, why isn't it working in this place? So, well, there's a different story for that one. You're like, yeah, but we're all being taught that it all just gets older and deeper. So none of it, everything contradicts, none of it makes sense, none of it's consistent, and you can just see the cracks in the story. And I'm not sure it's really worth worrying about the detail in all those cracks. The bottom line is the question, are we being lied to, yes or no? Yeah, if it's yes, then you're never going to know what the past is. And that's the issue. And then people are digging and digging and digging and saying, well, look, I'm looking at these nubs, they must be a code and it must be a hidden language. The fact that you don't know it's a hidden language and you think it might be a code is enough. That's enough to tell you to call bullshit on the whole thing. And once you call bullshit on the whole thing, you don't need to look anymore. You need to start saying, well, okay, well, if that's bullshit, what else is bullshit? And so you walk around these graveyards and you start looking at, where are the people? And you look and you look and you look and you look and you can't find them anywhere. And then you start looking for medieval graveyards, specific graveyards for specifically old people predating 1700. And there must be somewhere. No, apparently we didn't celebrate death then. We didn't use headstones then. Okay, fine. Why did we build the pyramids? We built the pyramids to celebrate death. Yeah. We built Göbekli Tepe. It was all about death. We celebrated death. Fine. So where are the graves pre-1700? Well, we didn't celebrate death. Okay, what one is it? We either did or we didn't. And if we didn't, where are the gravestones? Well, there isn't any. Okay, fine. There's a bit of a pattern forming, right? All over the UK, there's not many graves pre-1700. Now, people will call you out and say, you're full of bullshit, you're talking shit. I've been to the grave of Samuel Pepys. You know, I've been to St. Paul's Cathedral and I've seen these cribs. You know, okay, fine. When you do find these headstones in these local churches, they're all marked as J760, right? And you walk into St. Paul's Cathedral and not one of them is marked with a J. So what you're seeing is an on-the-ground reality, yeah, that's radically different to the reality that you're seeing in these sites where they focus people on, they steer you to these sites. Now you go to these sites like St. Paul's and they'll give you a tour and they'll look at figures that are, you know, famous people, historians, whatever. And and they're printed on the money, and it's all fabricated. It's all a fabrication. Because when you do look on the ground, you don't find the graves. And then you look at that as a pattern, right? And you say, okay, where else are there no graves? And then you go, okay, well, in America, there's none because no humans were there in 1766, before 1766. You're like, right, well, that's one great big plot of land. Yeah. Where did people come from? Well, they were coming from Britain because we were colonizing America and coming from Europe. Okay, fine. Well, what about Australia? They've got no graves either. Oh, well, we didn't get there until 1788. Yeah. And you're like, okay, fine. So there's no graves in Britain. There's no graves in it. And when I say no graves in Britain, this is if you get off your arse and you walk around the graveyards yourself and do your own research. Yeah. You can look for the lack of graves. You don't need to do it in Australia because you know there are none. You don't need to do it in America. Yeah, in the US, because you know there are none. You don't need to do it in New Zealand because you know there are no graves, right? So do you see a bit of a pattern forming?
Yeah.
So that's all of Australia, all of America, all of New Zealand, most of Britain. You can't find dead people.
So I guess that would apply to Africa as well.
Well, that's just a big desert and everything's been... And then you go into those areas and start saying, well, where did the deserts get there? How were those deserts made? And again, there'll be an excuse. Academia say this is a new question. It doesn't make sense. So what is really going on? That is the question. And
like, I think the deserts, it's like, salidation, right? So it's like, I think they had giant tsunamis could make a desert real quick.
Something's happened there. And of course, the other thing is you then start looking at what's been taught and given to you and programmed through music, video, film, television. You never see the movie of the whole planet that gets invaded, everyone's enslaved and imprisoned, and the end.
Right.
Yeah. And you were talking about this kind of like how fragile is the world. So there's always this overarching theme of apocalypse. Right. And within these movies, there's always this overarching theme of utopia. So you've got this apocalyptic utopia nonstop.
Yeah, we're obsessed with it as a culture.
Obsessed with apocalyptic utopia. So if you do things right, we could be here. We could be living like this. We could be living like gods. Mm-hmm. But of course, when you do get to that, it's all going to fall down and it's all going to be destroyed. So let's get high, let's get down. It's nonstop. So even if you're really successful, then it's all going to collapse and you're all going to be destroyed. Even if you're really healthy, then you're going to get cancer and you're going to die. Even if the world is amazing and we battle climate change and all the other stuff that goes with it, and we work out our past, then there's going to be a big tsunami, and look what happened to Noah, and we're all going to be killed. So what it's doing is it's always giving people this scenario where they're never ever going to be able to reach utopia, because it's an unrealistic utopia. Whatever you do is not going to be good enough. There's always going to be a better way to do it. So it's like a donkey chasing a carrot. But of course, what you're doing is you're telling the donkey that when you do get to the end of the carrot, there's always this story where once you do get there, the carrot's going to get destroyed and you're never going to be able to eat the carrot because there's going to be this carrot apocalypse. So you've got this donkey constantly chasing the carrot in an apocalyptic sense, that when he catches it, the world's going to end. And then we wonder why there's lots of depression and anxiety and stress and unhappiness and suicides. So it's all a control mechanism. It's all a version. Once you realize that everything is a lie, then you start realizing that the objective is these people don't care whether you know they're lying.
Yeah, so then that makes me think it's like, are we on a prison planet? And obviously, I feel like we are not the victors of whatever war happened or whatever. I mean, I feel like we are because if you were the victors of a situation, a restart or whatever, you would be told information. You wouldn't be going in at it at like amnesia like we are. No. So unless it is all just like some Maya game within our own self, and we're all like, our own little gods making up shit to fragment ourselves to like be entertained. I mean, there's so many different scenarios. It could be It could be aliens, it could be angels and demons, it could be giants, it could be in a mesmeric state doing shit. I don't know what's going on. I really don't know. But I do know I'm at a point where I'm going like something is behind all of this. And
So what's behind it doesn't care that you know they're lying,
yeah, they don't,
right?
obviously. So
It's
that's
like we'll work out the nubs and we'll work out the polygonal walls. They're sitting there going, well, so fucking what? You've worked it out. Big deal. Yeah. The point is you don't know the truth and you're not meant to know the truth. So it doesn't matter that you know they're lying. It doesn't matter whether you believe they're not lying. The thing that matters is that you don't know what the truth is. So there's only one example, one working, living example I can think of that scenario in a real life sense. Yeah. So this would be a scenario where a mother and father are desperately trying to have children and they can't have children. They've tried IVF, they've tried adopting a child, everything's been kicked back, nothing's working. So they then go into a hospital and steal a child. Well, that child ever going to be told the truth that he was stolen from a hospital? So you then end up in a situation where 20 years down the line, the child starts becoming suspicious. And the parents say, look, we know you're unhappy. There's something we need to tell you. And they sit little Johnny down and they say, look, the truth is, this is going to change your life forever. Yeah. So we need to tell you this properly. You were adopted. So it's just one lie after another lie. You know, it's just a lie countering another lie. So the objective is that little Johnny now thinks he's adopted. For another 20 years, he'll realize it will appease him. It will settle him down. He'll think, well, okay, I knew something was wrong. Mummy and Daddy told me the truth. And my parents died in a car crash and they've been protecting me and hiding me from it forever. It's like, no, the reality was you were stolen from a hospital illegally and you've been kept captive ever since. So every now and again, there's going to be a reset. You know, first it's just like this is your mum and daddy. Then he starts getting suspicious. Then he gets told that he was adopted. Everything's a cover story, and that's the only practical living example I can come up with that would see a group of people placed on the planet and they're deliberately given amnesia and they're not allowed to know what their history is. It doesn't matter whether they know everything's a lie, as long as you don't know the truth. And this is the same with little Johnny. So 20 years down the line, little Johnny realizes he's not been adopted. Yeah. Then what do you tell him? You know, there's only so long you can carry on with that. And in part, that kind of makes me think that where we are is probably only 300 years old. And the reason I say that is because everything you look at in the mainstream media is optics. It's an illusion. It's not the truth. And you can start polarizing things. So you look at the mainstream narrative, right? Everything's ancient. We built Stonehenge. We built the pyramids. We're Stone Age men. We evolved from apes into the Stone Age. Miraculously, you know, built pyramids, big megaliths. Then we forgot how to do it, and then we evolve into where we are now, which is bullshit. Clearly, things didn't work like that. So in terms of what's going on, we just don't know. And I don't think we're ever going to know. And I don't think I'm at the point where I don't think it matters. What matters is, you know, that you're being lied to and everything's a lie. And then you can start looking at the polar opposite of everything we're told. So the mainstream are saying, well, things are ancient. The alternative mainstream say the same. So you look
yeah,
at
see, but like I don't know what to do about that, because it's like I don't I don't know how to live with no, like, and I viscerally feel the lie. Like I know it's a lie. I know there's some, like, we're being lied to. Like, to what level, to what extent, I don't even know. But I definitely know that we are not given like our history, what's currently going on. I mean, like, it's just a giant sea of lies. And then, like, you know, I think about it, it's like religion gives you this whole bullshit story about how, like, there's these hierarchies, and then you are lowly, and then there's like this overarching gods that you have, like, that created you, that you have to worship, and you're not, like, you're unworthy. Okay, that's religion's ultimate message to you. And then science ultimate you know, that like that's a religion too. Scientists, like their ultimate message to you is you're insignificant. We have this whole galaxy, and you are but a flea on the back of a giant thing,
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
you're so insignificant. So I feel
Yeah.
like it's like we're getting bombarded with our own insignificance all the time, and that makes me kind of like go like, well, maybe we really are um bigger creators and capable of way more, just because like, you know, like your dreamland, like, which they completely discount as like, oh, that's just your brain doing some bullshit at night,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that makes me think like, yeah, I don't know, it is some sort of like mental shackle game that we have to like break
Yeah.
out of somehow. And
But the
I,
underlying theme on all of it is apocalypse on one hand, utopia on the other, and
yeah,
that's the underlying ethos that they're working to. Yeah, there's this whole universe, and you're never going to see it. At the same time, you're this primitive ape that you're lucky to evolve from. And while this is happening, everything could come crashing down around you, be destroyed. So be blessed, be happy that you've got this crappy existence that we've given you. And that's where we are. And the history is it's all superficial. It's all superficial. Some things happened 300 years ago. Something circa 1700, something has happened, right? There are no graves locally. And I challenge anyone to go and film a series of graves in the countryside in the UK and show me the graves. There, and if that's right, then that's consistent with the stories around colonization in Australia and America. Now, what's
right.
important to realize as well is now jumping forward to current events, and you see the nature of which are trying to lock everyone down and shut everyone up and suppress everyone and get them vaccinated and, you know, rein it all in and put them in quarantine camps in New Zealand and Australia. Now, if you're in Australia and you live in Sydney, you will probably see like a British or European style big cathedral, and knowing that you only your you know your ancestors only got to the country at the earliest in 1788. So the first ship arrived in 1788 with 5,000 bricks and no stonemasons. The next ship had the tools with it, and that didn't arrive until 1790. By 1820, they're erecting European style massive cathedrals. Now, if you're in Sydney and then you go traveling and you go to Europe, you're going to see all these cathedrals that are dated circa 1650.
It's like
You're,
when I was at Buenos Aires. I mean, Buenos Aires is like in Argentina. It is like just their, you know, what do you call it? Like New Greco or I mean,
yeah,
their parliament and their opera house is just like way on par
crazy.
with anything you see in Europe. It's just
Yeah,
everything's just super gorgeous, and I'm like, wait, when was this colonized again? And when did like I think it's even
exactly.
or even later than Australia,
Yeah,
you know, like
yeah.
that they're supposedly like came all the way down there, and you're going, how did they get all these materials and all this marble here and all this? Like, was this all found in the Amazon? Like, where did this come from? It's really
Well,
crazy.
one of the stories of Australia is funny because they specifically deal with the fact that there were no stonemasons, right? So one of the cover stories on the Australian history is there was a young lad that arrived on the first boat, and he can be tracked by name, and he was lucky enough to be a stonemason, a trained stonemason, right? He, bearing in mind the boat journey from Britain to Australia was 200 days. So this guy was 20 years old when he arrived in Australia in 1788 without any tools on a ship, on a fleet of ships that only had 5,000 bricks loaded on one ship.
Mm.
The tools were then coming behind on the second fleet that arrived in 1790. Yeah. So the cover story for them building some of these buildings is that young lad, because
Yeah,
he was a
20-year-old.
stonemason, was fortuitous enough to be able to train all the other convicts to become stonemasons. Now, when you find out the guy's name, you track the guy's name and you discover that 6 months after he arrived, he was caught pickpocketing, so they hung him. So that story completely falls apart because you've just hung your only bloody stonemason that's training all of the stonemasons to build these massive European style cathedrals. He never got on the boat until he was 19 years old. The probably spent 6 months or so in prison before he was charged, which meant he was 18. So his experience as a stonemason could only have been from the age of 18 to what, 15, 14. But yet he's the guy they say who's responsible for building these European cathedrals.
Well, and it's like, and
And
I
it's
mean,
utter bollocks.
all over the world, there's always fires that take out the whole, like there's so
Yeah,
many 1800 fires, like
yeah,
even in America, like there's so many, oh, like Cleveland was completely gone in an 1800 other, like there's
yeah,
so many of these fires that you hear about all the time, and I'm going like, I get it, they were into candles like more, I mean obviously they didn't have whatever, but at the same
yeah.
time, how does it burn down your entire city? Like, do they have
Agreed.
literally no space in between any
Yeah,
house?
yeah. And a good example of that is the Great Fire of London. So you walk around London and you see these kind of Victorian style buildings with basements. You see these churches and these cathedrals with these ornate windows. And then you look at the ground and you see these Masonic symbols that sort of tie it all together. And none of it makes sense. None of it makes sense at all, because you're seeing the same thing all over the world. You're seeing the same patterns that you see in star faults. You're seeing these basement buildings that also don't make sense all over the world.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about the Star Fort thing.
Well, I only know what I see, and there's not a lot on star faults, is it? Other than you look at
They're
them
everywhere.
and you see the pictures and you're like, oh my God, these are amazing. You then step back and you relook at it and say, well, okay, let's really try and contextualize how amazing these are compared to other things we look at that we are led to believe are amazing. So when you look at Stonehenge, you just see, 24 massive stone blocks that are not as big as you think they are, that you're not allowed to touch in case you wipe the lichen off of them, or the lichen off it, whatever you call it. And then you look at the star faults and you say, well, okay, these are much more marvelous, much more extravagant, and much more complex, much more sophisticated than Stonehenge. So why are we being told to look at Stonehenge and not look at the star faults? Then you look at the star faults in relation to like cathedrals, and you see that they're kind of tied together. And then you see the period of all the Victorian buildings. So, well, okay, well, that sort of falls into the same bracket. And then you reevaluate star faults and say, well, okay, they start looking like they're connected to India and Hinduism. Then you start looking at Hinduism and realizing that a lot of that was suppressed and it actually spread all over Europe as well. You really start asking what is going on, because this group of star-filled building, Victorian kind of cathedral builders is much bigger, much larger than the Egyptian culture. And then you think, well, okay, a few years ago I'd have looked at the dollar bill and said, well, okay, we know what the Illuminati is because you've got the all-seeing eye on the pyramid. And then you're like, well, okay, there's this like psyop around the Illuminati, this hidden hand and this hidden group of people that control everything. And you say, well, okay, well, how does that link to what we're taught at school? What we're taught at school is to all look at the pyramids. So you look at the dollar bill and it's like the all-seeing eye. It's not the eye that's all seeing us in this kind of Illuminati conspiracy theory. It's us all looking at the pyramid and not looking at this stuff. And that's what they're doing. That's why the eye is on the dollar bill over a pyramid, because we're all stupid enough to carry on staring at pyramids like Wally's. And while we're doing that, we're not looking at the cathedrals. We're not looking at these big houses. And in the British countryside, you know, there are tons and tons of massive stately homes that don't look too dissimilar to what you see in ancient Rome and ancient Greece, other than the fact that the sites in Greece have been destroyed and sites in Rome have been destroyed. They're, by all accounts, the same buildings. So if you
And
took
it's really interesting because like I was thinking about it the other day. I was just like laying in bed and I was thinking about like, okay, you have your three style of columns. You have like your Doric, your Iconic, and your Corinthian, or Ionic and your Corinthian columns, right? Like that's the main, and those are found all over. Well, they're like within a temple, like whatever, like let's say you take the Parthenon or something, they are so uniform and almost like they were out of like a mold or like, you know, like a ceramic. They're so perfect and so amazing and just the same in everything.
Yeah,
What?
you've been to Rome, haven't you? And have you
Yeah,
been to Rome?
yeah, I've been
Yeah.
to Rome. I've
So
seen them. It's
the
insane.
Parthenons, like those buildings are crazy, you know, and you look at them in context of, say, the British Museum, and they are done to a level that's higher than you see in the British Museum in terms of their columns and all the other stuff that goes with that. And then you start saying, well, okay, what the differential is, if those sites are destroyed and the ones in London aren't, then you start saying, well, okay, well, what would be the situation if there was ones destroyed in Britain? What would that tell you? What would it tell you if you saw that style building in Britain, but they were destroyed in the same way that they're destroyed in Greece or in Rome? Well, you then get to the next anomaly, which is there are buildings like that in Britain that
Yeah, I
are
was gonna say, what
destroyed.
about Bath and stuff? Like, if you go, you can go to
Yeah.
like Bath and like see. Yeah, I
So
mean,
if they're not Roman, the cover story is that the Victorians went to Greece and deconstructed these ruins and then moved them to Britain and then reconstructed them in Britain. So then you start looking at the shipping notes and all the other stuff that goes with it and who is responsible for it, and there's none. And likewise, when you start looking at these buildings and you start digging into who really built them and you know,
well, see, but that's what I
why
was
are there no people?
the point I was going to finish with that last thing was like, you have all these, they're like machine, like digital, like almost like 3D printed perfection of amazing, like you know, and they're uniform, like a Corinthian column. Look into a Corinthian column head type, right? And if you're, it doesn't matter what site you're at, like the building will have identical ones. And I'm kind of going like, what? How did they technically do stuff like that? Like, because I guarantee you, we couldn't do that by hand with a chisel today in a timely fashion. Some like we built, so even if you start looking at the world fairs and all those other that they tear down, like all these beautiful buildings and like kind of Chrysler building type stuff, like somewhere along the line we have completely lost our artisan. I mean, like now we build cinder blocks all over the world. We build cheap things that are just like, yeah, we build cinder block blocks, like wall, like you know, some sheetrock things that are very, very ugly and very, very temporary. And it's not that like, and then people will say, well, you know, it's time and it's money. Like they had like more, I'm like, we supposedly have the most money ever at this, you know, so like what's the deal? I don't know.
Well, and this is the issue. None of it stacks up. That's the issue. Like it would be misleading for me to say, you know, I know how this all happened. I don't. And nor does anyone. We're not meant to know. What we're able to do is look at it and call bullshit on it, give it the sniff test. And this is what we're doing now. If they were controlling the past, they've lost control of that because too many people are looking at our history and saying, well, none of this makes sense. And the reason they're doing that is because they've been given smartphones, they've been given the internet, and they're able to find pictures, post pictures, put them together in a way that the current education system was hoping to avoid. And what people are now doing is saying, well, we realize the word conspiracy theory is nonsense. We know why that was done, and we know it was done to discredit people that are giving things to sniff test. And that's exactly what's happening. And we're seeing, not everyone, but we're seeing a large proportion of society giving things to sniff test. And they're doing it in such a way that they're then saying, well, okay, look, I'm a basic human being. I was born in, you know, on this planet from a female. My IQ is not a lot different to the average person. There's nothing special, nothing amazing about me, nothing that different between me and someone who's done a degree. You know, I've done higher education. I've run my own business. I've employed up to 35 staff. And you look at this stuff and say, well, okay, there's not a lot of difference between people, really. When you get past most of the bullshit, there's not a lot of difference separating a world-class scientist to a normal person in terms of what they hear, see, drink, eat, smell, and experience. They then go to those sites and say, well, if I can see this, surely you can see it. And then that person, the academic, will come up with a textbook answer, and they're just falling into rank. And it's like, well, no. Like I'm at this site now, and I might not be an academic, but I'm a builder, and I build this stuff. And I'm telling you that can't have been done. So the academic is saying, well, okay, well, maybe we don't really know, and perhaps there's something we don't know. And the builder's saying, no, like, fuck off. I can tell you now, you can't lift up 100-ton granite block. And you certainly can't cut it out. You can't cut it with Bronze Age tools. Because I do this every day. Is I fit kitchens, for example. And this is what's happening. Those people are then coming home and they're putting a video together on YouTube, and then their mates who are builders, kitchen fitters, whatever, are also looking at it and saying, you know what, old Gary from the pub is right. There's no fucking way they did that. So they're then taking that narrative and then telling their friends and putting YouTube videos on it. And what you're seeing is a grassroots movement of people that work with this stuff saying, well, if we work with this stuff now and we can't do it now, how were they doing it in Victorian days? How were they doing it in Roman times? How were they doing it in the Stone Ages? So they've all collectively called bullshit on it. And this is what they've done. They've just said, no, this is nonsense. So where do you, if you're the hidden hand, whatever you call it, from behind, where do they go from that? Because if you're controlling the past, you're doing it to control the present, future. If you're losing control of that, what you do is you say, well, okay, we need to start putting things in position for when this all goes belly up. We need to start looking at voter ID. We need to start looking at digital ID. We need to start moving people towards digital currency. We need to put them on some kind of way that we can track them and cut them off if they ask too many questions. So what you're seeing at the moment is a direct result of people waking up through probably the period from 2010, certainly up to 2020. People have been waking up because of smartphones, because of low cost airfare. You know, people can travel all around the world for, you know, £400 or £500. And that allows you to get from America to Egypt, you know, go wherever you want, go to Russia, go to Peru, and start looking at these sites. And when your friends look at that, you know, you're tempted to go there, and this is growing and growing and growing. So it's no surprise that in 2020, there's this big thing come through that's allowed them to start censoring stuff, start reining things back in, and
Air travel has gone down quite a bit.
Air travels yeah.
They're gonna. I project, working in the industry and everything, I feel like it's gonna go back to, it's an elite thing to do. It'll probably raise the prices again at some point, or, you know, it's gonna change. It's not gonna stay the same as it was.
Yeah. So will it though? Will people tolerate
very
that?
restricted worldwide now, and I think it's with intention. But even like I have been saying, well, like the Iraq and Afghanistan war made no sense. I'm like, Osama bin Laden was Saudi Arabian. Like, why did you? I mean, and then I remember like this. I was 18 when that happened, and I was just like, this is bullshit. And then not only that, but you hear about all these sites that they destroy and all the, you know, like they mess with so much of the Sumerian stuff, which is like our oldest culture that we have, like our writing that we have, like it will say. And I kind of think that, I do believe that wars are a way to destroy stuff, destroy evidence of the past. Like they definitely do that. I mean, I don't get what else it's for.
Yeah. So what is going on? Are we in some kind of prison planet for the soul? Or are you deliberately given amnesia? Do you keep coming back, go to the light, come back, and you're wipes down, and you just don't know where you are? And if you're around too long, you might get a sniff of it. So you don't want to be living that long. Is that what's going on? You know, there's hypothetical situations where, you know, this is just a place, a prison for the soul. Something what started, what kind of spiked my interest with a lot of the ancient sites is the commonality that you see on every site. One, they're unfinished. Two, they're destroyed. So something's going on around every one of those sites that they're unfinished and destroyed. So the people that were doing the work were advanced. You can see in places like Aswan where they were softening rock. You can see in Peru they were softening rock. You can see on the front side of the Mankawi, or the lower levels of the Mankawi pyramid, they were clearly softening the rock in some way. The accuracy of the joins between each block on the Mankawi pyramid can't be seen until you scrape off the top layer, which they also seem to have done to the rock at some point.
Yeah.
So Mankawi just looks like a series of puffed out marshmallows that are like muffins that are baked in a grid, not a tray, like a grid pattern, like a mesh, and the top has oozed out. And it's not until you cut the tops off that you can see the joins. And when you look down the joins, they're like vitrified. They're a glass finish, and they are like you can't get a human
Credit
hair
card,
down the
or,
side of
piece
each one.
paper.
It's just crazy.
Yeah.
So when I was there with Yusuf, we managed to find a section that chipped off, and you could see down the gap, and it was polished. So on the face of it, you've got this kind of muffin top with a nub with nubs on it, next to another muffin top with nubs on it. But what that means is they've carved the rock rough, and then they've placed it. Then the lower section they've cut completely square, and then placed that into position, but intentionally left the top half rough, which is bizarre, and made every block a different size. So it almost looks like someone with advanced technology has done it in the sense that they're creating a modern mystery, that it's a wind up. Because one, you can see that they've done it quickly and easily.
Well,
And
I mean, yeah, and nubs are weird. Like they're not attractive. They're
no,
and like
no,
if you went to the trouble to make like Olive Tomblay or something like that, like you think you wouldn't just polish off the little protrusions that you had for whatever reason. I mean, like they're intentional in some way. They're not attractive. I mean, they're cool. I like them. Like they're attractive to us now, like the whole mystery and all that stuff of them. But I mean, stereotypically, it makes it look unfinished and it's not consistent.
You know, when you go into a butcher's now, they have one of those blue fluorescent lights, and you're standing there waiting to pay for your meat, and you just steer a zzz, and then you're another zzz,
Yeah.
and these flies are going to the light and getting zapped. Sacsayhuaman and Egypt, Giza Plateau is like that. We're basically going to these sites, then it's just getting zapped into our minds to stay on that page. And this is what happens. Then it's not until you pry your eyes away from those sites and you start looking at the star faults and you start visiting graveyards and you start looking at the basements and the sunken windows and start asking why.
Yeah, but I love those sites because they get you to listen to the rest. They get you to start exploring. Like they're good jumping off points because like they're definitely hard to debate that whoa.
But they're not finished and they're ruined.
That's true.
So either these people started building it with this amazing technology and couldn't finish the job. It's almost like having a football team, but you've not got a striker. You watch 90 minutes of football, you've got the ball the whole time, but you never once try and kick it in the goal. It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that none of these sites seem to be finished. So if you're trying to create a situation where a group of fish are in a tank and you want them all swimming around the castle at the bottom, the fish are swimming around wondering what fish built the castle. So you then take the pyramids and you look underneath it and it's just got a TM made in China at the bottom of it or something. And that's why they're not finished. That's why the shipwreck is at the bottom of the aquarium, and it's a shipwreck. It's not a boat floating around on the top, because it's never intended to be a boat floating around on the top of the water, sailed by other fish. They look like, logic says that they seem to look like they're modern mysteries. In my view, they're manufactured mysteries.
Okay.
Someone somewhere is on the wind up, which is why they're putting it on the money and getting everyone to look at it, which is why it's built into popular culture and you're getting it to look at it. So while you're looking at that, you're then not looking at other things. So let's assume there are no people 1700, pre-1700, there are no people. There are certainly no people in America, certainly no people in Australia, certainly no people in New Zealand, other than indigenous people. But you're not looking at a large scale society there in the modern sense. You then start looking at orphan trains, and that's an eye-opener when you realize the amount of orphans that were distributed all over the world.
Yep.
You then start talking to friends and family about their ancestors, and you don't need to go very far from home to realize that most people have an aunt or an uncle or a gran or a granddad that was brought up in an orphanage. Everyone knows someone that was brought up in an orphanage. Well, where were your parents? So they would say, well, okay, well, it's really, really bad. If you had a child out of wedlock, then you'd be a pariah, social pariah. No one would want to know you. So that's why the parents would drop off babies on the doors of an orphanage. And you start saying, well, fine, okay. Well, at the World's Fairs, why are there rooms full of orphans? What's going on there? Because if you're having a child out of wedlock and you have it premature, that's almost a blessing in disguise, given that you'd be a pariah for having a child out of wedlock. You wouldn't then maybe take it to the orphanage. And even if you could, how quickly could you get a premature baby from some kind of bizarre, obscure Victorian basement somewhere to the orphanage by horse and cart before it dies, on the basis that it's maybe 2 or 3 months premature? So you've got these incubator babies, which are just weird, that not many people know about, but they're not hiding. You then see the movement of all the people through the orphan trains. And you're not, that's only in our recent history. So where are all the children coming from?
Yeah, no, I mean,
Yeah.
I definitely have like, like or it's like both of my grandfathers lost their mother by the time they were 5.
Okay then.
Or, yeah, it's, like one grandmother, she was from a ton of
Yeah.
kids, and they adopted, she has, I don't know if she has 1 or 2 adopted siblings, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely.
So you get into the forests, and the story is, well, deforestation. We did that. Fine. Okay. There must have been a shitload of people doing that. So where are they all buried? Don't know. Okay. Why are there no headstones? Okay. Well, we didn't celebrate burials and death. Okay. Fine. Well, why did they build the pyramids? Well, they're celebrating death. So that's a contradiction. I'm not saying I know the answer. I'm just saying it's a contradiction. And then you look at the orphan trains and say, well, where are the parents? Well, they were all, everyone was having babies out of wedlock. Really? That many babies out of wedlock. And then you look at the Dickens novels, and typical
Yeah, I was gonna say,
situation
like, you have
is,
your Oliver Twist and your, yeah.
yeah. And where are the parents? They're all in a lunatic asylum. Yeah. Well, what do the lunatic asylums look like? They are massive Victorian buildings. Well, who built that? Don't know. And if you do know, he's also the same architect has built that hundreds of other buildings that are exactly the same. So you start looking at the Victorian buildings, and you start looking at the architects, and you start looking at the orphans, and you start asking where the parents were. And then you realize that most of the parents are locked up in lunatic asylums. So if there was a big reset happened and they wiped it all out, and the survivors are sort of saying, well, look, we know what's happened. What are you going to do with those? Where are you going to put them? What are we seeing in Australia at the moment, where people are putting, where conspiracy theorists that are not vaccinated are put in quarantine camps, aka lunatic asylums? And why would you build huge Victorian style buildings that are highly complex to lock up the local nutters? Who would fund that? The local community won't fund that. You're not going to go down your local church hall in Victorian England and go, look, we've got a couple of wackos here who've just had their kids adopted. Any chance we could have a whip round? We're going to build them a great big Victorian mansion, and we're going to lock them away forever in it. Wouldn't you just go, I'll tell you what, you have my house and I'll move into the mansion?
Yeah, exactly.
It's just nonsense. It's just complete bollocks. None of it makes sense. You wouldn't go into your local Victorian community, have a quick whip round, lock up your local wackos, and do it in a great big Victorian mansion, specifically built for
Well,
that
I mean,
purpose.
I still can't get over what is the statistical, like, and all of my friends think I am so crazy for this one, but I still can't get over it. Like, this, I've been on this since I was a kid. I'm like, what are the chances that the moon and the sun appear to be the same size in the sky? I get that you're saying the sun is all the way this many miles and the moon's only this miles, but what are the statistical chances that they can actually create a full solar eclipse? Like, that just even as a kid, I was kind of going like, this
Going
is
on.
contrived. This is so
But it's
created.
one of
Because
those
look at that.
issues that is it even, unless you can trot off to the moon with a tape measure, it's really not worth talking about, because when you realize everything is a lie and nothing we're being told is as we think it is,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't really matter. What does it matter? Like, you can only you want to focus on the things that you can manage and monitor and check and change yourself, yeah, and then draw your conclusions from that. I can't go to the moon and measure it, or the sun. So
Well, I mean, it's more to me just that,
is it
like, the
really open for debate?
perfect
Is
light
it?
and dark balance is just so, I don't know. Like, I don't know. It just something about it just seems very like we're in an aquarium. We're in something made.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's where we are. That is where we are.
that's
We're in a people farm. That seems to be the scenario. We're in a people farm. It's harvest time, but recently something seems to have happened. It's almost like, recent weeks has seen the whole narrative of recent events change. Now, is that because something's happened and they've said, "Oh shit, this isn't working"? One of the things I've seen happen on the recent narrative is that my children's school, they were really pushing masks test. It's like masks, get tested, get masks, get tested. The kids all said, "Nah, we're all exempt." These are 12 to 16-year-olds. So what you're now seeing is the head teacher doing videos on YouTube saying, when we come back after Christmas, we're really going to nail it down hard. Like literally all of you little buggers are going to wear a mask. And the children have just said, "Fuck you."
good.
So ironically, have we all just been saved by 12-year-olds?
Leave those kids alone.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, yeah.
So you're getting this whole kind of spiritual thing. It's like, well, okay, it's these light workers and this hidden agenda and these people coming in and these souls with knowledge. Well, let's just be cynical and say, yeah, well, there is. Okay, let's just put it out there and say, well, not cynical is the wrong word, but let's just say, yeah, it is. The souls that are the newest are the 12-year-olds, and they're not really listening to the bullshit like we are. They want to play their PlayStations and get on TikTok and have a look at people. Yes, they're open to propaganda, they're open to influence, but they all seem to have collectively just said, "No, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it." And the kids' school has been pretty crazy, because when they rolled out the V thing, a load of protesters come in and stopped it. The head teacher then lied to the parents and said the uptake of the V thing was so great that we couldn't finish it. The reality was that the protesters stifled it, but he didn't tell any of the parents. So then they've rolled it out again, and he said, well, okay, that was because the first uptake was so high, all their friends want it. But the reality is none of the kids are taking it. So the narrative seems to have changed. In Britain, certainly, they've been really pushing it by the schools. Do your LFTs, do your masks, do this. And no one's played along with it. The kids haven't got involved, and the parents have sort of said, I smell a rat now. So in the last few days in Britain, they've said, right, no more masks, no vaccines. So what's going on this, or what's really going on behind the scenes? You sort of get a sniff of what could be going on behind the scenes when you look at one, that we've all been divided, and there's all been wars, there's all been disagreements, there's all been Brexit, and then piff, paff, poof, everything's in lockstep and they're all on the same page, all moving together, all with the same agenda. And they're doing it in a way where, yes, it's compartmentalized, but it seems to be a large scale group of people that are almost like a breakaway society living in plain sight, who are the elites and the private equity firms, hedge funds, etc., just playing along with this. And that's what surprised me in the last 2 years is the level of coordination and agreement against the backdrop of no one ever being able to coordinate or agree on anything previously. So how did that happen?
I don't know, but I wouldn't get too comfortable with. I mean, I feel like they're not done with whatever they're doing. It's like a caged animal, you know. It's like a
retreat and regroup is what they've done.
Yeah, I think, and I definitely, but I at the same time with other people, you cannot comply your way out of tyranny. That's not how that works. So you're going to have to. Like this isn't gonna be a just let's put our head in the sand and not talk about it and it'll go away. It's not gonna happen that way. So yeah.
So where are we? Like the conclusion is that I think a lot of people have given a lot of individual and different subjects to sniff test, whether it's Jimmy Savile, whether it's satanic ritualistic abuse. Mm-hmm. Within government, whether it's paedophilia, whether it's our history, whether it's our more recent history, whether it's walking around graveyards, whether it's looking at the moon and looking at the sun, asking the questions you're asking. traveling to Peru, traveling to Egypt, collecting thousands of pictures off of Pinterest and Instagram, Twitter and Facebook, and then putting them together and coming to your own conclusions. But the overarching issue is that the academics can't not see what we're seeing, and our eyes aren't lying. So something is going on, isn't it?
Yeah, something's going on. I definitely think we can agree on that for sure. And but what to do about it is the next question. You know?
Well, I think the power comes from knowing.
No,
You
that's
know,
true.
it's
I think knowledge is power, and you know, like I feel like if you know you've been had, it's going to be more difficult to
yeah,
trick you in
yeah,
the future, or you know.
yeah, yeah. You know, I don't know what analogies could you use. It's a little bit like the genie in the bottle. Once the genie's out, does it really matter that who put him in the bottle or why he was put in the bottle? The fact is, the genie's out and you can get your wishes, and he ain't going back in. So, you know, the rest is history. Literally, the issue is our history is not actually being used for what it should be used for, and there seems to be a concerted effort to make sure we don't know our history. And I think most people would agree on that the history isn't right. The academics can't not see what we've seen. So the question is, why are they not telling us what's going on? Do they just not know? Is it that simple? Is it about self-preservation? Do they just not know? It does look really crazy. It looks like something out of a Star Wars film, but we can't go around and tell everyone that because we're meant to be sensible. Personally, I don't think that's right, because when you go
I
back to
think
the
that's right with the vast majority of current people that are in academia for sure. But like, no, I mean, I think like if you, for my own opinion, is I think there's a smaller number than you think that are really, you know, the puppet masters. And I think a lot of like they're useful idiots. You know, a lot of these people are really good. They're really they're really indoctrinated, like sincerely indoctrinated, and they believe what they think. You know, I do think that they believe in their Clovis theories and their, I mean, whatever.
When we say they as well,
They
what does that really mean? Like you've got, say you've got a degree student, you've got a master's student, you've got a doctorate, yeah,
okay.
professor, and then you look at them and say, well, okay, where's the established opinions? And we say they, we're referring to them, but they
Okay,
would
in this
say,
particular case, I'm talking about like if we're just going into academia. I think that they believe the eight tech, they being the, like, let's go with archaeologists because we're on ancient history stuff, or we're talking about that. Okay, so like a lot of the established like PhD archaeologists, I'm not like speaking for all of them, but I would say if you mention the word Graham Hancock, then anything else you say is not at all valid. Like, don't talk to them anymore. You are like an enemy of the state. And so they basically, these PhD archaeologists, let's say, they only believe in the books by other PhD people that have come.
yeah,
there's a very limited thing that they can get data from. They can't get any data from the Google Earth, like people's tourist photos. Like that's insane that we would even suggest that's so beneath them. It's like they can only get their information from like these few sources and then these
yeah,
few sources, which maybe it goes. I don't know how far back it goes, but there's only like what's valid is very little. It's a very small window
yeah,
that they can use.
yeah. So when you take the journey upstream, as you just have, you get to a very small group of people. So we'll have these conversations and we'll say, well, they, as in the academics and that, but they actually have their masters, their paymasters,
Yeah.
their funders. And I know from my experience in sport and sports doping that when you start speaking to sports scientists that are trying to do work on the safety of some doping products, um, then it's just a dead end, because the people that do all the funding for anti-doping are WADA. So WADA are not going to, WADA run on hundreds of millions of pounds a year. WADA are not going to say, well, look, here's, I don't know, 50 million pound, do a ton of research on why doping should be legalized. Because obviously, if you legalize doping, well, what are we going to do? So you're never going to get the funding to look at sort of legalizing doping or looking at what products are safe within the confines of doping. When I say products, I'm talking about products that the average woman over the age of 35 could use legitimately as hormone replacement therapy. The average product that, you know, a guy over the age of over 40 could get for testosterone replacement therapy. So there are professors who are saying, well, look, I want to do some credible research on, you know, what this does, whether we should be banning it, whether the risks, whether the cure is worse than the cause is worse. So I can't say it. The cure is worse than the cause, whatever.
Right.
The cure is worse than the curse. So
the cure is worse than the disease.
The issue is you're never going to get the funding. So if you said to a mainstream university, I want to do some research on, for example, the Serapeum and Saqqara, because I don't think the Egyptians cut that with brass tools or bronze tools, they're just going to tell you to piss off, because you're trying to undermine everything they believe in. So when you've got this mechanism of control with money, you're hamstrung all the time, because you're always pushed back into this textbook compartmentalized belief system. And when you go back to these cathedrals in the 1600s, this period in the 1700s, and you start looking at the kind of architecture they were building, it almost looks like they didn't really need to be doing it. They did it because they could, and they had the time on their hands and the resources to make these amazing things, because it wasn't really an issue of time and money in the sense that we've got time and money. It's like we have this underlying apocalyptic utopian mindset where the meter's always running on taxi, and you're paying to play non-stop. It's pay to play planet Earth, and you know you're born on this planet, but you've got to survive on this planet, and that means entering into this matrix system they've created, where you can't stop and you can't think about things. And this is what I think the lockdowns have done. The lockdowns, if they've done this to sort of rein things back in and put the genie in the bottle, it's had the opposite effect, because in lockdown, everyone's gone on the internet and started studying these different things.
Yeah.
Let's say everyone, that's everyone that we know.
Right. A lot of people. More than I think they were.
What the hell's going on? Yeah.
Unless it was by intent.
Yeah. So I think we need to just accept that they don't care whether we know they're lying. They don't care whether we believe what they're saying. None of that's relevant. The only thing that's relevant is that you never know the truth. And that I think is the agenda.
Well, they're pretty successful at that. I have no idea what the truth is.
So when you talk to these, you know, you have a chat with a friend, and you show them a few images, and you tell them a few things, the immediate reaction is, well, what's going on then? As if you're meant
right,
to know.
As if like you want me to give them all the answers.
Yeah. It's like, So I've shown you all these pictures, and they say, what's going on? Are they expecting you to pull off a lizard mask and go, it's old Farmer Joe, like you see at the end of Scooby-Doo?
Right.
And is that, at the end of Scooby-Doo, part of the programming to make them realize that if that person can't tell you what's going on, you're not Scooby-Doo. You're not the hero saving the world. Because to be the hero saving the world, you've got to be able to tell them what's going on. And if you can't tell them what's going on, then whatever you're telling them is rubbish. So because they've been programmed to think that way, any dickhead that can say, yeah, it was this, and by the way, I've got a PhD or a master's or whatever, then, and you haven't, then they'll think, okay, that's good enough for me, I'll go with that. Yeah. And that is how it works.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate, I think.
And it's no more complex than that, until you start making them think. And then they kind of get into this bit of a frenzy. It's a sense where they're like, well, what? It's almost like they're just jumping into an ice cold lake, and they start feeling themselves drown. And it's like, well, okay, you can either sink or swim, or you can take the red pill or the blue pill, and you know, you just what do you do with people like that? If that's how people are programmed, the only advice you can give them is that you need to get your head around the fact that you're not going to know.
I mean, I think it's one of those things where it's going to be Like I don't care what pill you take, but
Mm.
you're gonna have, like, I can't convince anybody of anything, you know, like you're going to have your moment though. You're gonna be presented with your whatever that is, whether it's through modern, through history, through you see a UFO, you like, I don't know like what's going to happen to you, but there will be something in your life that will give you the fork in the road, and then that's when they'll
Mm.
have to decide their own self, like whether they want to be an ostrich or they want to like go like what's going on here, and then that's their own prerogative and they can do what they want with that. Like I just uh it's so many more are questioning than I ever thought would, which is awesome. And but I
Yeah.
do think that as a person who is a questioner, um, it's a, you. And if anybody was watching this interview still, then like they probably
Done well.
like they
Done
still
well.
need to know that like like don't allow people to belittle you for being a questioner. Like that, the time of that is over. The time of being allowed to be discredited and just take it
But you
and
know
being
what?
guilt
That
shamed, that's
works.
over.
The basis is saying, well, come on then, smart ass. How did it all happen? Right? That is how your that works. This situation where you are able or enabled um, to sort of belittle someone else, because I don't know what's gone on. This is only my view of what I've taken, or my opinion that I've got to literally after walking around graveyards, being inside every pyramid, walking around the Egyptian Museum, regularly going to the British Museum and touching this stuff and looking at this stuff.
Yeah,
Um,
and you have a you went to, I mean, I loved your images that you got from the Seraphim, and you
yeah,
have some of the best, like he's gone to Stonehenge and like touched the stones, like all like right up in their business. Like you have some of the best footage I've ever seen of Stonehenge.
yeah,
So you have been.
and that's what I recommend. Like, you know, I'm a balding grey guy that's telling you what I've seen with my own eyes. If you don't believe me, go there yourself. Simple as that. And that's the advice on people. It's like, stop talking about it and go and look at it. And yeah, it's difficult with the travel restrictions, but you've been to these sites. You know, you've looked at these sites, you've
Well,
touched these
everybody has
sites.
something within their own backyard too. Like,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
if you're in the UK, there's a ton of stuff. Like if you're in the US, like there is a ton of stuff. Like don't let them tell you that there's not. Like go see Chaco Canyon, go see like whatever. There's so many crazy. Go see the mounds. Like there's some stuff.
I saw what tickled me quite early on was there's a guy with about 450 followers on an ancient history site, and he was saying something about his opinion on the Mankawi pyramid. So I just messaged him on Twitter, said, when did you go there? He said, oh, I haven't been there. I thought, well, shut the fuck up then. You know, start talking about when you've been there and you've walked to these sites and you've looked in these sites. Um, you know, the group we're in, some of those guys haven't been there, and I'm not critical of that, because they're doing other stuff in terms of trying to collect and put all these pictures together to take an overarching view and then say, well, okay, look, these are all the hallmarks of people that have been to these sites, have been here, they've been here, they've been here. We've studied those. So, you know, that work is the equivalent of going to those sites. But your layperson that would try and maybe watch a video like this and go, God, those guys are talking bullshit. Then, you know, go there, go to these sites, look at these images, build up your own database of pictures and start looking at the overarching um, viewpoint on what's going on. Like, I showed a friend of mine recently the stone of the pregnant woman,
Mm-hmm.
and he yanked
Baalbek,
and said,
Lebanon.
like, okay, do you get this? This is massive. And he was like, yeah, yeah, it's huge. Like, how the hell did they do that? You know, like, I don't know. You know, again, same question. How did they do that? It's like, well, if I knew that, I wouldn't. It wouldn't be a mystery anymore, would
Well,
it?
and the other thing is that I find so many people are like, who cares?
Exactly.
And I can tell
Exactly.
you exactly why
Well,
you
this
should care
guy
about
cared.
Baalbek.
So the good thing was this guy cared. So then once he'd seen that, um, then I showed him. I said, how the hell do you think they made that? And he showed him the temple where they've moved those blocks to. And he's like, so they actually did move them. You're like, yeah, and you can see the undercuts where they planned on doing it and they were quarrying that. Next to it, you can see lower blocks where they were quarrying those. And he was like, Jesus Christ. So then now that he understands how it works, I took him to Yanshan quarry, not literally, but showed him pictures of Yanshan. So well, they were trying to do the same thing there by the looks of it that they were doing in Baalbek. He was like, well, that could only been done if you had a spaceship. And it was like, well, okay, now like this conversation was happening on a messenger text message or WhatsApp. So I said, now we've had the conversation and you've seen Baalbek and you also seen Yanshan. Go back to the start and then look at how they all piece together collectively. And he did that. And he come in and he said, this is just crazy because they're all doing the same thing. One's in China, one's in Lebanon.
Yep.
What the fuck is going on? And again, I'm like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what's going on. I'm only telling you what I've seen and saying, well, you should see this. And while you're looking at it, you should ask, one, why you're not being taught that at school. And two, why you've not got this knowledge through the education system that all these people are doing the same thing or what appears to be at different times, which, obviously isn't different times. And more importantly, where did those people go? So you then start getting into the realms of where did they go? And where I'm at with it is I don't know, but there seems to be a missing group of people before 1700. I find it very coincidental that you walk around British churches looking for British headstones and there are near zero. You then look at Australia, New Zealand, the US, and the output is the same. There are no graves. The story and the justification as to why there's no graves is different, as you'd expect. But I just find it a bit of a coincidence that there doesn't seem to be many graves or much evidence of large-scale population in the UK, other than paper. So someone would say, oh, there's loads of records. I've been on myhistory.com and I've checked my DNA. Like, why do you think they rolled that program out?
Yeah, I know. I regret doing it.
Yeah.
I did it.
Why do you think they led you to believe that you could track your ancestors? Yeah. Why do you think the people in Australia are waking up and going, well, hang on, this isn't really our history, is it? Why are there buildings here that look like they were built before we even got here? So you're seeing people in Australia asking questions about why the buildings look older than their civilization or their society. You're seeing the rollout of superficial fake DNA banks where you can, pay money, and because you've paid money, you're going to believe the output, and the output is here's all your ancestors. Well, you don't know that's real, do you? You're not going into the laboratory with the DNA. Where are they getting the DNA from?
Well, the other thing is, like, I did that. I went to in 2000 and I went to a TED talk at like a TED conference, like in, I don't know, like 2010, maybe 2011. And at the conference, I spit in the little cup. So I was like very, very early on at 23andMe. Like I was at a, yeah.
Right.
And I got it. I did it for free because I was, whatever, like 20.
They give you in return?
Stupid. And
a list of people by name.
Yeah, like, well, but but the thing is like they would tell me, oh, you're this person, like, I had 1% sub-Saharan African, and I was a 4% Neanderthal, and I was, like, whatever. It would tell me all this stuff, and then everything has changed. Like, so that was from 2011, and then now you have all the way to 2022. Like I should have taken screenshots of what it told me I was in 2011 versus what it tells me I am now.
Oh, and it's changed.
It's completely changed. Like now I have 0 sub-Saharan African. They say I'm 100% European, and now I'm like 2% Neanderthal, and now I'm like
someone's lying, aren't they? So
I
100% personally lying. The whole thing is,
and then they get down to where they can like tell you what cities your ancestors came from, but only up until like 1600s, like nothing before that. Yeah.
But let's assume they're lying. How are you ever going to check?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that's the thing.
So you'll have these conversations with people now, like, yeah, but I've had it. I had that test. You're like, you don't know it's real though, do you? You're like, yeah, I do. They wouldn't lie to me. You're like, oh, of course they wouldn't. How do you know it's actually
and it's like my grandfather's Slovenian, and on my dad's side, and so it does show that I'm like a quarter Slovenian. But then I found his dad's passport like about a year ago or something, and he was born in Italy. So I'm like, okay,
Yeah. What's going
but
on there?
yeah, like, and they have zero Italian. So according to that test, so I don't know. The whole thing is just kind of crazy.
So effectively, it's nonsense.
I think it's
It's
nonsense.
all it's doing is trying to pin the towel on the donkey, isn't it? It's like, well, we think you're coming from about there.
Well, I mean, I
That's
also think
negative.
they could have looked at
That,
my last name, which is the Slovenian last name,
yeah,
and then,
yeah,
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 the rest of
yeah.
me is
You kind of
basically
want
Indian.
to do the test twice with two different names. Your DNA is not going to change, is it? We're going to change your name.
Well, that's the thing about like people talk about DNA as if it's just like that's like that's become a blanket word for like advanced knowledge that where it'll be like, well, I mean, they do this with our DNA or do this. I'm like, like whatever these V things
Yeah.
and like the mRNA and all that. I'm like 10 years ago they were calling it junk DNA. Like you think that they've completely sequenced the human genome and they're I and if you start getting into my scropacy and you start looking at like what's the smallest they can view things and
This is the benefit.
what does DNA look like in a telescope? It's you start kind of going like I think a lot of this shit is bull. I'm starting to think a lot of this shit is bullshit.
There is, and like I said, that's why you keep changing things. It's like, well, if we do this and bring out this new site and this test and that test, you're like, and then this will change. So you're like, well, actually, when you said you knew then, you don't know, but you're saying you now know more than you did then. So we built that belief on something we believe to be effective and true and accurate, and now you're saying it's not. So that belief doesn't matter. So we'd stop talking about that. Let's worry about this belief. That's just conspiracy. You're like, well, no. Let's come back to that. And this is like this ever changing. The sands are always changing beneath your feet. Yeah, under guise of evolution and like technology is changing. And then you then look at the past. You're like, well, how do they know where the stars were? It's like, oh, they could manage them. Like they could monitor them and measure them. You're like, well, we can only do that now. It's like, oh yeah, but we're changing, aren't we now? You're like, yeah, they could do it then. It's like, yeah, that's just
Yeah.
sort of conspiracy theory. You're like, well, no, let's just stop. Let's just cut the story and like put it back together. Back then, they were monitoring these stars. Like, and you look at Stonehenge. I was lucky enough to go to Stonehenge with Robin Heath, who is a world class academic mathematician. And what he was saying is that Stonehenge was actually an eclipse predictor. What they were doing in Stonehenge is they were desperately trying to predict the eclipses. So, you step back from that and ask, well, what value has that got? I don't really pay much attention to astronomy, uh, and when it's an eclipse, I don't feel any different. I don't wake up howling like a werewolf with like claws on my fingers and stuff. It's just like just another day. So why would the ancients be so bothered about the eclipses? What were they trying to look at?
See, but
What were they
then that's
trying to
when you
do?
kind of go, well, I mean, maybe they didn't have, if pineal glands are even a real thing, I don't know. But like in terms of like, maybe they didn't have calcified pineal glands and like that kind of shit really did affect them more and they could do more. Yeah, I don't know. I always do find it weird. It's
Or
like,
maybe the moon, they had some tech that was being suppressed by the moon, and as they were being
yeah, that could be true.
invaded and imprisoned, it was important to them to know when the moon was least effective.
The
They could
solstices
fire
make
up
more
their
sense
tech
to
or
me.
do something with it. So what I'm saying is the fact that we don't feel any different means that the
Right.
rationale for monitoring the eclipses can't be based on our feelings or emotions. It must be
Right.
based on something else. So, you see ET phone home and he's trying to phone home, and, there seems to be a ritual, but it's not a ritual. It's a practical thing that becomes a ritual and then becomes diluted, because it isn't Stonehenge that's the eclipse predictor. It's the Woodhenge that was built around the outside of it.
Okay, but here's the thing about that is like if you're in Great Britain like 3,000 years ago or however many thousand years ago supposedly it's supposed to happen is like and you're not globally traveling, an eclipse may hit you like one time in your lifetime if you're lucky. Like, like I don't I think we're supposed to get in 2025, like we're getting a full solar eclipse is coming over where I live in Dallas. And that's probably I don't know when the last time that's happened, but like I think there's like 4 to 5 eclipses a year, depending. I can't remember the number. And they are all very specific places. I mean, there's places that haven't had an eclipse go over their direct path in hundreds of years. So, I mean, what are your, they're not like common enough where it's, I mean, sure, you could see partial eclipses maybe and lunar
So
eclipses as well.
these people must have been doing it for a functional reason
Yeah,
in some way, because it doesn't change. Like I say, you don't wake up on a night of eclipse and you've got claws and you're howling like a werewolf and you've changed into something.
unless maybe they
Nothing's
did.
different. Well, normally anyway.
Right.
Uh, uh, so it must be a technical thing.
Oh, I mean,
So
like that.
what was happening, what was going on, and then you then look at Stonehenge and you start asking, well, they went to all this trouble to manage to monitor the eclipses, and they weren't using the stone blocks to do that. They were using the wooden stumps around it. So then you start looking at the stone blocks themselves, and you see evidence of foldovers and ripples in the blocks, which don't look natural. And you start asking, well, what's going on there? And you get into these kind of like castles at the bottom of fish tanks as distractions, and that seems to be where we're at. A lot of it. I'm not saying that the pyramid is a manufactured fake, but let's assume that there was a civilization living in Florida that got wiped out, and one of the only things that survived was Mickey Mouse.
Right.
So how
That's
long
like
would it take
Epcot
to
Center or
form
something.
the cult of Mickey Mouse? These people were worshipping the mouse. And as crazy as that sounds, you look at the Egyptians and you look at what they were worshipping, and they were effectively not for that, because most of the gods have got animal heads. They're green, they're blue, snakes, whatever you want to
Yeah, a bunch of
call it.
cartoons.
They're not that far removed from Mickey Mouse when you really step back. Obviously, it's really built into our society that they were really doing this. These were real mythical figures. But how long would it take to take a Planet of the Apes type scenario, surviving in Florida after some kind of apocalyptic event, for them to re-establish a society and then excavate Disneyland? What would they think of it? Would they say it was all cultural, religion? These were the gods. Maybe the mouse gods populated the planet years ago.
Yeah, maybe.
Where do you draw a line in the bullshit, other than the fact that it just all seems to be bullshit?
Yeah, I know. It's yeah, that's the hard part though, because I have to like not get black pilled, as they say, where you're just like, yeah, it's all
But the
fucked.
things that the media are not talking about is the recent buildings, the history on the Victorian buildings. There's less history on who built the Victorian buildings than there is on who built the pyramids.
Hmm.
And when you do find architects that have built these Victorian buildings, they've literally built all of them, and they've done it within 20 years.
Right. Yeah.
This is at a time where there was no internet. You had to travel from A to B by horse and cart, or send messages around,
Right.
or
There's no power
telegrams.
tools. They don't have like
No,
electric drills. They don't have,
no.
yeah.
And they all built the same buildings all over Europe. Well, actually, so it's not until you start looking at that's more intriguing than the ancient stuff, and you start realizing that actually the ancient sites are few and far between. Like what have you got? Saxo Haman, got Coricancha, you've got the Serapeum, you've got Abu Rosh, you've got Aswan,
Well,
you've got the locations
there
in
are tons
India.
of ancient sites, but
Yeah,
like, yeah, but I'll give you that. There's a lot less of them than there
not
are.
yeah, Paris, Moscow, London. You walk around all these cities and there's hundreds of these buildings, but we're not paying any attention to them because we're looking at this other stuff. And they've put it on the money to keep us focused on it. They put it in Transformer films. They put it all over Hollywood, all about the pyramids. So, something's gone on there, but other things have gone on elsewhere. So, like I said at the beginning of this chat, it doesn't matter that they're lying as long as you don't know where the truth is. They don't care whether you know the truth or don't know the truth, or know they're lying or don't know they're lying. It doesn't matter to them. The point is this is here As long as you're not looking at that, then from here to here, you can create endless amounts of lies or spin or propaganda. The objective is for you to not look at that. And if you do look at that, then we can weave that into all this as well. So when people say, well, how do you think it was made? I haven't got any idea. And I think I've come to the conclusion that I know I'm not going to work it out. And that's kind of a long leap to make, because, you know, there are people we know that are trying to work it out, and that's a route to insanity. Or it's making the problem worse, because even if you do work it out, no one's going to legitimize that for you to prove that you're right.
That's true.
So, you know, where does that end up, other than you kind of end up in a situation where you just need to accept that you've been lied to and keep your wits about you and try and navigate, you know, your way through this existence, and watch your back and make sure you don't, you know, make sure it doesn't get to you too much, because you're not going to work it out. And everyone, you know, everyone you speak to, everyone you show this stuff to, their opinion, their response is always, so who did it? It's like, you're never going to know.
Well, we're never going to know. All right, Dan.
You just got to accept that.
This is a good talk. Good. It was cool.
Yeah, and that's it. So, yeah, thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
All right, see you soon.
You
Bye.